While AI platforms like ChatGPT can be helpful for patients with ME-CFS or Long Covid, I think it's fair to say that it doesn't really harness the fuller potential of AI to help out patients with these sorts of conditions. In today's video, I am interviewing Jess Dove London, who has started an artificial intelligence platform called Turny, which is trying to maximize the potential of AI for patients with specific conditions, including ME-CFS and Long Covid. My name is Patrick Usher. I'm an ME-CFS patient and author of the book Understanding ME-CFS and Strategies for Healing. And today we are talking with Jess Dove London in part one of a series of 2 interviews in which we're going to do a deeper dive into her platform Turny, which is specifically for patients with ME-CFS and Long Covid. Now, what sets Turny apart is that it has actually indexed everything to do with ME-CFS and Long Covid from the last 10 years. That's all the research papers, patient forum discussions, that includes YouTube and podcast discussions, it includes expert discussions in other contexts, conferences, etc. And so when you want to ask Turny a question, it will actually draw upon all of these different data sets to give you a range of perspectives, which can then allow you to make a more informed decision. But it also is very much customized to you and your situation, as you can input a lot of data to do with your health situation and what you are particularly interested in. And every week, Turny will send you a personalized update on what's been going on in the ME-CFS and Long Covid world, which is relevant for you. So what this means in practice is that, let's say you have said you're particularly interested in the research of post-exertional malaise or ways of improving your stamina. Turny will actually read everything to do with Long Covid and ME-CFS from the last week, all the patient discussions on different forums, all the new research, conferences, YouTube podcast discussions, maybe 1,000 to 2,000 different specific data points. You'll analyze those and it will send you 10, 12, 15 things that are the most relevant for you. So as I say, we have a 2-part interview series. Today, we're going to talk about the background to Turny. We're going to talk about how it works. We're going to talk about, how you can join up because the first few weeks are free. There's also a scholarship program for those experiencing financial difficulty. We're going to talk about Jess's backstory because she herself had ME-CFS. And we're also going to talk about her son who has cerebral palsy and how both of, her experience with both of these conditions is kind of been an inspiration or motivating factor for her to develop this platform. And in the next episode, which will be released in about 3 days' time, we're going to do a walkthrough. So we're going to look at the daily update, what does it actually send you? And we're going to be asking Turny 4 difficult questions which have been suggested from within my ME-CFS patient and research support community. So today it's kind of the basics, the overview, and next time we will actually dive in and have a look at how it actually works in practice. So just for full disclosure, I now have an affiliate arrangement with Turny. As my ME-CFS channel has been growing, I've been looking for sponsors and affiliate partnerships with companies that I can get behind, which I feel, are helpful for ME-CFS patients, which are useful for them to know about, and which support my general mission, which is to teach about the research and, talk about ways to improve quality of life. And for me, Turny is a very good fit for that. I've tried it out myself and I'm going to continue trying it out because I think it's going to give me, helpful tips for myself moving forward and also helpful suggestions for videos that I can actually do. So this is something that I think is a useful tool. And if you want to try out Turny using the links in the description box below, that means that you will be able to try Turny at no extra cost to yourself, but I will get a small kickback, which will support my work. I hope you enjoy today's interview with Jess. So please leave your thoughts and comments down below about what you think of Turny and what kind of features would you like to see in its platform that you think could be a good example of how AI could help people with ME-CFS and Long Covid in particular. I'm really glad to be joined today by Jess Dove London, who is going to be talking to us about some really exciting new uses of artificial intelligence, specifically for people with ME-CFS and Long Covid, in ways that can really help them to make sense of their condition and find ways to move forward. So, Jess, thank you so much for joining me today.
Great to be here.
Jess, tell us a little bit about your background, please, because I understand that the platform you developed, Turny, it's very focused on ME-CFS, Long COVID, Cerebral Palsy, and you have had personal experience with all of these conditions in one way or another that have led you now to want to help people with these illnesses. So, can you tell us a bit about your backstory, please, and what led you to this point?
Yeah, so I think about 15 years ago, it's sometimes it gets a little bit muddled when you're on these health journeys. I got very unwell. I had to leave I was working for the Red Cross in Southeast Asia and I got very, very unwell. I was bedridden, didn't know what was going on, ended up having to leave my job, move back to Australia and New Zealand where we had family. And yeah, I got very sick for over a year and a half, where I was always having to lie in bed and have no light. At the time, there was very little online community. It was very, very hard. I didn't even have the term ME-CFS. There was words like post-viral syndrome, chronic fatigue. Those were the sort of labels that I was given. Went through 15, 20 doctors. The story where you don't know what's going on. You've just suddenly lost all these capacities. I had no idea that I could be. There was so much I didn't know that you could, what, like, just living a day in a life of my normal life, what that was taking from me. And I just couldn't do most things. I couldn't get in a car. I couldn't read a book. I couldn't look at a screen. I could talk to someone for 10 minutes and that was my whole day gone. So yeah, it was a very, very big experience. And I had some recovery after about 17, 18 months. And then through a whole other journey, ended up having children who had some serious health issues. So when I had my two twins, they had very serious complications, and then both of them actually went on to develop cerebral palsy, but one had a very rare type. And so yeah, when we'd gotten through them coming out of ICU, we were just so grateful they were here with us. They were very wonderful, loving, incredible little beings. And so when we went down the journey of getting diagnoses, I think having been a patient and being told there was nothing we could do to help them, I probably had less. I was like, really? I'm not sure. I've been here before in a different way when being told there was nothing I can do. And I think from having the ME-CFS journey, it takes back then there was just so little information. I didn't even know what pacing was, and what you'd do, you'd meet someone who'd had a lived experience and you'd be like, oh, tell me, like, what's happening? If you had this, like, what, it was a very isolating, tricky experience. And so when my kids had these health conditions, I guess I'd had some, yeah. I relate. I sort of had this experience of, okay, I'm going to have to find things. I'm going to have to know. It's going to be on me to work this out.
Before we come to you kind of, I mean, like which, I mean, just the classic mother, I'm not going to take that as an answer. I'm going to find ways to actually help my kids if you don't mind.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Before we come to that, like, I think people listening to this would be interested, how did you improve from ME-CFS? Because it sounded
Mm.
like you were in a pretty bad place.
Yeah, I guess probably the experience taught me. I mean, I didn't have any silver bullet. I think I did do a handful of things and I can share them because, always, again, like when you're on these journeys, you want to know all the things that people do because you want to know, is that connected to me? Probably one of my primary symptoms was a chronic headache. So I had a headache at the back, like I always just had this headache. I had fatigue, I had brain fog, and light sensitivity was a really big issue, and any movement. And so I did a whole bunch of things. I think the first 9 months I just did nothing. I just and I had no idea what pacing was. So I would have a day where I had more energy, and I'd push myself, and then I would have 5 days where I would pay for that 1 hour. I mean, it's an unbelievable experience. I think again, it changed me like to like have a sense of I just think it's such an incredible illness that it's so hard to relate. You know what? I actually view it like being in an alien in on the earth because
Yeah.
someone you go and see someone and you look fine. You look normal. And even I'm a quite a bubbly personality, so I'd be like this, and then I would be like in bed in the dark.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. Well, th this is the thing that, I mean, that is I think so hard for people to understand about ME-CFS. It's actually primarily defined by the reaction to things. And that's what people don't see, is they don't
Mm,
see what happens
mm,
afterwards. And
mm,
so they think you're okay or whatever, or you look functional, but actually,
mm,
and they think you're over anxious because you're thinking, can I do X and can I do Y?
mm,
But, it's
mm,
the response that's the problem. So yeah,
mm,
and also you're right, like it's people cannot, like when I was well, I wouldn't have related to this. I mean, it's like
100%.
it's so hard for people to get their head around. So it is a bit like being from a different planet, actually.
That's right. And I was very lucky. I had one very good friend. Like I had a partner who saw the reality, and he's also very kind of more gentle personality. I'm not very judgmental, but I had a very good friend who also could see it, and she could see the 5 days after, and she was like, "What is this?" Like,
Yeah.
because it just yeah. So after that experience, we did a bunch of things. I did a little bit of gradual, like I did some fasting. I had a medication that a neurologist put me on that was very effective in helping. I did a little bit of gradual movement, and again, I had no idea about all the debates going on about exercise. I didn't do any extreme exercise, but I did walks in the country, and I could. Some days I did like as the months went on, I sort of could build some of that up. Um, but I don't feel like, I don't know what the secret sauce was, whether fasting, whether it was this. To this day, I take medication every single day.
Mm.
I do. So yeah, after I had my children, I was very sick. I couldn't actually move my head or get up out of hospital. So like, it's very. I don't have the answer. When I was pregnant, I was very well.
Well, that's interesting because that's not uncommon in
Mm,
ME-CFS that actually people, when they're pregnant, because they increase their blood volume
unbelievable.
and that actually makes them feel better while they have it. So it's
Yeah,
a kind of sort of
unbelievable.
temporary fix for ME-CFS is to
That's
get
right.
pregnant. Yeah.
So I was very, very grateful that probably the first 3 months when my kids were in ICU, I was very sick and I did get a bit of help. I couldn't go in cars or any of those things, but I did have recovery.
Yeah.
And to this day, I have had a few really big flare-ups. Like I once got I once got the flu vaccination and I was lying on the floor for 6 days afterwards. But I guess I've had a lot of recovery and um, I don't know, but I know I still have this autoimmune. I can still, it's still something where I'm very finely tuned to, yeah, but it's a journey. It's a journey.
It's a journey, but it sounds like you got to a point where you're able to, live a pretty full life, even though there's maybe less
100%.
susceptibility. Yeah.
100%, Patrick. That's right.
Yeah. Okay. But when it comes to your children and cerebral palsy, you were faced with a situation where, particularly one of them has this more rare form, and you're thinking, how can I help them? The experts are saying,
Mhm.
this is just how it is. You weren't
Yeah.
going to accept that. So tell us now, like, how did you go about trying to help out your kids, and where did that lead you to?
I think by the time my son was diagnosed, I had a lot of my health back. And when I was unwell, I couldn't do the research that I needed to do for myself because for me, one of my biggest symptoms was reading. I couldn't read very well. Like it just hurt me too much, hurt my head so much. So, when I just remember the exact day when he was diagnosed, and it was an offhand diagnosis. It was all the things it shouldn't be. When I now know. Um, but I think I went home and it was like 11 at night, and I just remember doing research and reading, literally reading some random blog about some parent trying something. And I actually ordered a piece of medical equipment that night because I needed agency. I think people can be very patronizing about patients trying things, but having agency is a very important piece of, us working things out, and the ability to try something when there's no clear answers. And for us, by just luck of chance, we tried something that was unbelievably effective. Our son was almost 2 and he couldn't sit. He lay on the floor all day rolling around. And we tried this proprioception bodysuit and he instantly sat and we took it off and he kept sitting from that day onwards. And so it was just wild. I was like, how have I uncovered this? So I just threw myself into reading the literature. It was very difficult to negotiate the literature, even though I've had a few degrees because it's a complex movement disorder. Facebook groups were incredibly helpful. I started hounding world leaders. I just went on this massive journey of trying to find everything possible. And it's funny, I've thought about it afterwards where I feel like I had this fundamental question, which was, what is the latest treatments or the latest things people are learning? And I didn't know who to ask that question to. I'd ask everybody it and not and I'd get like a piece of the puzzle from my physio, I get a piece of a puzzle from this consultant. I'd read this paper and I'd try and like puzzle it together. Like it was incredibly difficult. It took me years until I actually feel like I have the puzzle pieces of the basic map of what was going on and what is actually available and what's actually having some, yeah. So it was a very long journey, and I ended up at an academic conference. ME-CFS and Long COVID have a very strong patient community, but the cerebral palsy community is very behind in sort of its patient engagement or its lived experience or carers. And this was a huge conference, 1,500 academics. First time they'd ever let anyone with lived experience attend the conference. I mean, can you believe it? Like all that information just hidden. And yeah, I was in this conference and I was just learning all these new things. And I actually was in one session with one world leader who did a huge talk on all the cutting edge things coming. And I actually put my hand up and I said, I shouldn't have to fly around the world to learn about these cutting edge things. This should be available on my phone to every single person. So just found this problem where cutting edge information is behind closed doors in conferences. It's living with that one incredible specialist. It's with people with lived experience. You know this so well, Patrick, because you puzzle piece it all together. But it's just a matter of chance, right? And how much time and ability you have to do that hard work. If you're lucky enough to have a great doctor who's supporting you or not. There's so many complexities on these complex condition journeys.
And I really resonate with that point about the need for agency is so important. The amount of times, to use the example you gave, where I have tried to share with doctors what I've looked up myself, and you get this catch-22 because they know nothing about ME-CFS, and yet they will say, why are you looking up stuff on the internet? Well, it's like, if you're not going to, then, who is? Like, someone has to,
Yeah.
And so in the end, ME-CFS patients have to be very resourceful. I think that is recognized by the ME-CFS experts because, as you say, there's a lot more bringing the patient world and the expert world together in the ME-CFS, than in other conditions. But this is why I'm so excited about what you're doing, because it leads into allowing patients to have more agency and to actually take charge, especially when cognitively it might be quite difficult to keep track of everything that's out there. So you're now working on fulfilling this kind of need. So tell us about, you've developed two platforms now, Turnto and Turny, but tell us about, the kind of work that you've actually been doing in this area.
Yeah, so we started with an app that we built initially just for my son's condition, where we tried to bring daily new things every day to people in a sort of easy way to digest this. So, one thing people may not realize is every day and every week, there is new things everywhere that's happening. This is kind of part of the problem. There's maybe 20, 30, depending on the condition, 50 new papers a week published on your condition. You kind of start to understand and have more empathy to why health professionals are not up to date, because it is a really difficult problem. Then you have, we've had this explosion of incredible YouTube channels. So, you have experts, 10 years ago, experts weren't sitting on YouTube sharing some of their latest insights. And we have more of that democratization of expert knowledge. We have patient forums where people are just sharing thousands of things a week. ME-CFS and Long COVID has one of the most active patient communities, and there are literally thousands of things a week. Then you have trials, clinical trials. There's just this problem when new things are happening. I often think of it like it's actually a very basic problem as well, because you've got groups of patients here, and then sometimes you have these other groups. You have organizations, pharma, all these players, and sometimes they like miss each other because they're like running events. Like sometimes there's these incredible online events and no one turns up to them.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. I've seen that, yeah.
They can't fill a clinical trial. And then there are these people here saying, what can I be doing? I'll try anything. Tell me about the trial. So it's a very complex problem where there's just so much happening in a condition and you're just sort of mapping it all out. So the mobile app we developed gives people daily information. We try and capture new insights from patients or carers and experts. But one of the things we found, so we've launched this community, we took this to Long COVID, ME-CFS, Parkinson's, and we've seen lots of engagement. People are using the product, but also we launched an email called What's Happened This Week in X condition. And it's just very, very popular, but it's not personalized. And so we've got a lot of feedback from people saying, yes, that's great, but it's not relevant to me. Like I'm reading these things and I just, maybe you don't want to look at an app every day. Maybe you want someone to do the cognitive work for you. And something our team talk about is there's so much happening in AI. What can we build that does the heavy lifting for people? And exactly like you said, how do we have more empowerment, more agency with less time? Because time is tricky. Cognitive, there's so many different things of managing a condition. And there's sometimes months you don't want to be doing that work. It's a very, my son, my kids are 10 years old. We've had, some calmer periods, and then you have a new thing pop up and it's suddenly like go because you have to make a decision about something, or there's surgery or new medication. So, yeah, so we built, in the last few months, we've been thinking about what more value we can build. And so our mission is to speed up health breakthroughs with free or low cost AI products. At the moment, everything we've done is for free. And we've launched a new product that does this sort of heavy lifting on personalization, using all of this power in AI to find every single thing new and try and give you personalized updates from all the new knowledge as it's evolving. So that's sort of where we've landed with our latest sort of iteration that we've just launched a few weeks ago.
Okay, so fantastic. So the free app, which has been available for a while, that's the Turnto.
Yeah, yeah,
And now what you've launched now, the new product is Turny, and you're using AI to really, so people can actually input what they're interested in, all their symptoms,
yeah,
their complete health history. There's
yeah.
lots of space to actually put that in. And then the updates that you're sending them are really tailored to their situation.
The complex thing again is if there's 1,000 new things a week, what is the 10 things you need, Patrick, for wherever you are in the world and the symptom that's on top right now? And how do you easily update something without it being this job to do? And so we built a complex system that finds everything new, goes and finds things for you, looks at new trials for you, looks at events for you, reads your on top symptoms and tries to also connect the dots. Because sometimes as well, we don't, one of the good things about AI, the new use cases, is connecting the dots. Because sometimes there could be symptom related to this symptom that you may not know about, but it's in literature. And so that's the hope of this product is it finds you 10 to 14 things a week. And it reads everything. It actually, every single person, it reads over 1 million things, 1 million words per person to create these sort of highly personalized updates.
Turney also has this feature where you can actually do a deep dive
Yeah.
on, specific questions. And this is very interesting because, like I've been using ChatGPT for that for a while. And I kind of avoided AI altogether until about 6 months ago. And then I started using ChatGPT. And I found it helpful, but after some time, it's become a bit stale. And I feel like it
Mm,
doesn't quite grasp ME-CFS like I want it to.
mm,
So what's really interesting for me is to have an AI platform that's actually thinking about ME-CFS and long COVID and as is built for that purpose.
mm.
So tell us a bit about this deep dive
Yeah.
feature and asking questions of Turney.
Yeah, so I think, so at the moment what we do when we have a health condition, we index the past 10 years. So we just do an intelligent index, we call it. So we try and shape like a database just on that condition where we look at, and our thesis and my personal opinion and, whatever, if people agree or not, being my lived experience is all the voices matter. So research matters, patients matter, experts matter, orgs matter. Because the problem is that the information lives in different places and there's different reliability in all the different sources. And so what we built for the deep dives is, a part of me thinks ChatGPT is just going to get better and better. I have a lot of hope for ChatGPT. Maybe there's a ChatGPT doctor. I think it's going to empower patients like never in history. I think it's going to change how we do medical appointments, change our relationships with our physicians and our doctors. Very excited. But one thing, I guess, our tool, and again, we're very experimental. This deep dive is like the weekly updates is one expression of this concept because it's what's new this week. The deep dive, the concept is how do we give you diverse opinions as quickly as possible? And again, that's just our thesis. So one of the things I've found on my journey is just vanilla information is often just so useless. I mean, it's very helpful when you know nothing. What is this treatment? Okay, great, I understand it. But I think there's a lot of complexity when there is in these complex disease states. So the tool intentionally will find you recent but diverse perspectives. It'll find you, so for example, like I was on a call with someone who's, a leading therapist, and she leads, has thousands of therapists in her network, and she's a really a thought leader in pediatric therapy. And we and her were using our tool, and we were asking about a protocol for a treatment that has not really been looked at for one population. And the tool found literature, and it said, hey, here are the recent papers, but none of them have looked at this subtype. And so for me, that's the answer I want patients to have. I don't want them to have a generalized answer that, this could be helpful, or I often find, that that's not interesting. But what's interesting is, well, then when it went to the patients, it was finding all these things patients are doing. Or there was a podcast last week where one leader got up and talked about their thoughts about using it in this subtype. And so again, we're trying to do that investigation work for people. We don't want to give you an answer. We want to actually just bring the most recent sources together for you. And to be honest, Patrick, this is just the beginning. There's so much potential in
Mm.
this space to aggregate diverse opinions together.
Yeah, well, that's not my experience of using Turny so far has been it feels more like a personalized research assistant as
Mm.
opposed to ChatGPT, which is just giving me these more generic answers, which, I find a bit more frustrating because I really want to engage. In terms of other things that could come in the future, you have plans for what else Turny can bring to the table?
Yeah, I think there's so much. I mean, this is one of the things people are giving us all this feedback, and it's kind of this amazing opportunity, but also a challenge. We're a small tech startup, we're trying our best to do all of this, but, imagine if, and again, I'm sure people are playing with these experiences, which I really encourage in the sense of I think ChatGPT is amazing. You can create projects where you can upload documents. There's so much you can do there. So I think things that we're thinking about is, at the moment we only do two things. We give you a weekly update and we do a deep dive on a question. We've talked about things where on your dashboard we might be able to have an up-to-date list of just evolving clinical trials that you're best suited for and are close to you. So it's not a weekly update, it's sort of this, or events that like are close to you. This concept of this thing that's working for you, or there's even so much more we could do with our weekly update where we do a really high level analysis of your health history. People have said they want to put, because when you on board, you can just talk and it makes a health background for you. People have wanted to add more information about that. Like, they want to put their test results in. And again, to be honest, ChatGPT is really good for that. Um, but imagine if we, then we can move into that space and then we could correlate across to other data points. Because again, it's our mission. We're not trying to generalize that information. We're trying to connect dots between different data sources.
That actually was a question that one person in my community wanted to ask you, which is, will users be able to upload lab test data on the platform and receive advice and or recommendations from AI based on that data?
But we don't yet do that. And again, I think if you haven't played with it, I suggest doing that. You can, there's actually two really good products. There's obviously ChatGPT. And for people watching this, if you are newer to AI, there's a lot of AI that's been said all across the places, but there are these few platforms who are the ones building the foundations of AI, and OpenAI is one company, and there's this ChatGPT, and there's also Gemini, which is Google's, and then there's Claude. So those are the three ones I think people should be using if you want to be at the front using the best AI. The Google has an amazing product called Notebook LLM, where you can upload all of your things on the left, and then you have a chat bar and you can talk to your data. But we haven't yet done this, but we could do this. And I guess right now our difference is we're getting you up to date sources on everything, where other experiences are looking at all the knowledge out there. So it's a little bit more generalized, and it's not going to have a quote from a patient last week who's like you. It's not going to have that your podcast. I think when you and I were playing with the deep dives, something you'd mentioned came up in the deep dive, like your own
Yeah,
podcast came up because
yeah,
you'd
and I
done
and
such
I've
a
done
good.
it the day before. Yeah.
Yeah, so and that's our hope for the tool. So again, we aren't and the truth is sometimes you don't need the most up-to-date information to get a really good insight on your health conditions. But yeah, we might go there. Because again, I guess the mission that drives me every day is how do we speed up health breakthroughs? And one part of the things that I really think about is we can't automate on information that hasn't been captured. Think about all the people living with ME-CFS and all the different, like, why is research being so slow in this condition? There's so many complex reasons around funding and agendas and, how do we build that evidence base? Like, I truly think this because I've had this lived experience. I look at, and this is, I'm not an expert in this space, so just take this with a grain of salt, but I look at the HIV crisis that was in the 80s and all the terrible treatment of different communities. And I look at ME-CFS and I just see this huge correlation where there was just this lack of acknowledgement of this unbelievable condition that's been destroyed so many people's lives, but it hasn't been taken seriously. And a part of me thinks, how do we gather that data? And one individual person doesn't want to wait for that drug trial that's going to take 8 years to come through, right? Like, how do we speed this up? It's always just, yeah, that's the thing that I think about.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that, Jess. And it goes to show how the kind of work you're doing, it's not just about, helping a patient in the moment, but it has a bigger, purpose, which is how can we actually speed things up? Because this is a huge thing that I often think about is,
Yeah,
how do we make sure that it's actually, in the end, people are actually getting helped? It can only happen when the research and the system kind of moves along. Can you tell us about, how do people join? How much does it cost?
yeah.
What if someone is suffering from financial hardship? Are there options for them?
Yep, yep. Yeah, so right now we have you can sign up to the health sidekick. So you're just like you mentioned, this Turny persona that like kind of works for you. It costs $2 a week. You can try it for free for 3 weeks to see if you like it or you don't like it. And we have a scholarship program. So when you onboard, if you can't afford it, you can click a button that says I can't afford it. And we are really committed to this as a team. It costs us more money than what we're charging for it, in terms of because when you run a tech company, you pay for AI. And again, that's one of our thoughts is how do we make this affordable for the most interesting things that AI can do for us. So I'm so excited by all the chat experiences people can use for free, but sometimes the most interesting things you need the pro accounts for some of these like really long, complex tasks that AI can do. Like when you do deep research projects on ChatGPT, you don't get that many credits or you have to pay for them. So that's the process. You can sign up, you can try it for free for 3 weeks. And what we're going to do if people are using our mobile app, which will always be free, our community product, we are going to start giving people some credit so they can use some of these things for free to see if it's useful or not. Again, is it useful? That's the question our team asks. We also will be, we're always trying to innovate. We are going to be putting a whole repository up, a free repository, which is going to actually be all the treatments, all the symptoms, product in the next month as well. Because again, we're just trying to share this in different ways. And, if I could, I would give that weekly update for free to every single patient because I think there's a lot of hope in it. And to be honest, we have had some organizations, leading orgs in different conditions coming to us wanting to offer this to their communities and wanting to fund it. So, that's actually the real hope is that it's sort of carried by other groups as well, because not everyone's always going to be able to afford things.